Hey, welcome to the Big Bite here with Sunny and Shay on BritAsia TV. Another show full of celebrities, some chefs who are going to give us some ingredients, and not forgetting the taboo subjects that we talk about that affect our community.
Now, if you'd like to get involved and perhaps give us some suggestions on what we should be talking about, or you'd like to tell us your opinions, you can drop us an email. It's info@britasia.tv, or you can tweet @BritAsiaTV, and throughout the show as well, it's @Sunny and Shay. Joining us in the studio for this show, we have Faiza Vaid, who's from Muslim Women's Network UK. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Tell us a little bit about what Muslim Women's Network UK do.
So we're a national network of individuals and organisations working on issues affecting Muslim women in the UK. So, you know, our work ranges from issues of domestic violence, forced marriage, mental health issues, and generally our aim is to help women across the UK. So even those who aren't Muslim women who contact us will be able to get information, advice and support, you know, based on the work that we do.
So what is some of the, you know, helplines' biggest queries or the biggest thing that you help people on?
Yeah, so the Muslim Women's Network launched a helpline in January of this year. It's called the Muslim Women's Network Helpline, and you can go onto the website and find lots of information on the range of topics I just mentioned. But if you ask me what the most regular inquiries we receive, they are always related to marriage, divorce, abuse.
Right.
And I know we're here today talking about domestic violence, but actually there are many forms of abuse which exist in our communities, particularly our Asian communities.
There's something to be said about the South Asian community that always tries to hide everything or keep it under the carpet. You know, we'll hear it on the national news. There's been a victim who's been married for many years and she's been, you know, abused physically and mentally, not only by her husband, it could be her in-laws. It's a subject that we just don't like to talk about, and victims are always encouraged by their families not to say anything. Why is it in 2015 that's still happening?
I think it's endemic, and I think a lot needs to happen to change that, but unfortunately that is still the reality. Victims are told to suffer in silence, and they are forced to suffer in silence, and I think we can really change that by raising the issues like we're doing today. And I think what we need to get away from is blaming the victim.
Right.
Because it's never the victim's fault, actually. It's the perpetrator's fault. If you're committing a crime against another individual, that person needs to take responsibility. And as a community, we need to ensure that we are not blaming the victim and say, oh no, you know, she was like that or he was like that. Actually, we need to hold up and hold our hands above the parapet and say, actually, if you've done wrong, you have to, you know, face the consequences of your crimes, and that's blaming the perpetrator, not the victims.
Now, don't you think that sometimes that, you know, some communities that feel that, you know, this is a problem on the rise within our community because of the pressures, it could be economic, it could be for whatever reason, that it's come to the point where, you know, there is domestic violence within the family. The reason why they're not saying you should be accountable, because it's happening in their own house. So if they start pointing the finger, they need to take care of their own home first before they start judging others. So do you think that there is a problem inherently in all homes, and that's why no one's coming forward and saying it's your fault? You are the, you know, you are the perpetrator, therefore you should be, you know, held accountable because it's happening in their own homes.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, but actually we need to look at the statistics on this.
Right.
So 1 in 4 women will face domestic violence in their lifetime.
Wow.
Okay. So
1
think
in
about
4.
1 in 4. So think about going out with your friends on a night. You know, usually at least 4 people. 1 in 4 of those friends will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, and that's the national statistic on that. We also know that in our Asian communities, the crime isn't reported. So even the statistics we do have for Asian, South Asian women and men going through domestic violence are high enough, but I know are still lower than what the reality is.
Right.
And it is for the reasons that you are saying. But do you see that by not talking about it, we're not going to eradicate this problem?
We're talking about facts here, you know, a very sad fact, and one that is not publicised enough and should be, is the fact that in this country, suicide rates are 3 times more higher and more likely in South Asian women than their counterparts, than any other women. So, in a sense, our community, we allow women to kill themselves. We'd rather that than they actually come out and say, I'm being a victim of domestic abuse, a victim of any kind of abuse in our homes.
I think, you know, again, you're spot on, because actually what we need to understand about domestic violence is that it isn't only the crimes themselves that are impacted. The negative impact of domestic violence is far-reaching. It affects a person's mental health, their physical health, and the person will find different ways to cope with something as serious as domestic violence, including self-harming, including eating disorders, including anxiety and stress, even facing people in social situations. So for me, this issue is so important because actually, if we don't tackle it, what we're saying is that we're opening the doors to all these other issues, and we just want the women and men to just deal with it themselves in isolation, behind closed doors, and when they go out into their family situations, put a smile on their face and pretend that nothing's happening. That's not on. And it cannot, continue in this day and age in Britain today.
Domestic violence, I think you just addressed it there, that it's not always physical, and it is sometimes mental as well. So just give us an idea of someone who might be listening right now thinking, I don't come in this category because no one's ever hit me, no one's ever touched me. That's not always the case, is it?
No, it isn't. So I think what we need to understand about domestic violence is that it's psychological, physical, emotional.
Give me an example of a psychological way of, abusing someone.
Okay, I think control and coercion, I think those are two of the words that we need to think about. So somebody can control you in a relationship. So whether that's preventing you from seeing your friends, even sometimes your family, controlling, who you speak to, where you go, what time you come back home. So control is quite important in these.
And this might be looked upon firstly as care. For example, if your wife or your spouse has gone out for a night, and the phone call comes, are you okay? You safe? Where are you? That's how it starts. And slowly it's like, I don't like you coming home that late because it's not safe out there. Then there's a safety issue. And before you know it, where are you going? You know it's not safe. And then from that concern, it goes into a bit more darker area. It's the dictatorship. Because you've already been, let's say, conditioned to a certain degree that, he's only thinking about me or she's only thinking about me. I shouldn't go out there. I shouldn't do this only because he's concerned. So that's what you're saying. It's almost like, it's like conditioning someone in the soft way first, and then it just, you can't do it.
And I think what we need to ask, and often victims don't recognize themselves as victims until things get really, really serious.
Right.
And what we're talking about is the difference between a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship. And this is some of the work that the Muslim Women's Network tries to do, particularly in schools. Speaking to young people about what is healthy, whether you're in a relationship with, a boyfriend, girlfriend, or even with your siblings or even with your friends, what's healthy and what's not healthy. What's not healthy, if we think of what we would say to a child, if you're being bullied to do something, if the person is constantly checking up on you. And we have to ask ourselves, what happens when you don't give them that information? What happens when you don't tell them, actually, I'm home now? What happens if you don't tell them, actually, I went to the shops on the way home from the bus, So what are the consequences of not telling them? So let's look at it from that light. And like we're saying, victims won't recognize it themselves. But as friends and as family members, we'll probably spot the signs before they do.
Now, you raise an interesting point there. There's two really key, examples of that. I mean, although you said earlier anyone can contact you, sometimes religion can be used as a way of control. It's not only people who are in relationships who can be victims of domestic abuse or victims of any form of abuse. It can sometimes be your own parents. It can sometimes be your brothers, your sisters, or your in-laws. And that's really important to stress, isn't it? It may not just be your husband and that kind of the physical that we do hear a lot about. If someone's watching right now Brit TV and is thinking, some of the points that you've raised is something that I'm going through or something that I know someone's going through, what happens when they contact you?
I think what we try and do is really hear the person out, because that may be the first time that they've actually vocalized what they're feeling, and they may contact us and say, actually, I'm going through all of these things. I don't know what it is, actually. Or they may contact us and say, I'm having mental health issues. But when you dig a bit deeper, actually what you find is domestic violence may be the underlying root. So what we're able to offer is information, advice and support. And we can, refer them on to organizations who are specialists in dealing with this issue. There are people out there who can offer you counseling and support, other projects up and down the country. So wherever you are, don't feel that you're alone, because actually, you're not the first person to have gone through this. And actually, there are people out there willing to help you. And I think that's one of the stigmas we need to face, that actually women feel like they're alone, no one understands them, and they're not going to be able to get the support that they need. But there are lots of people and organizations out there ready to help them. So I would say contact us, and we'll try and give you the best sort of advice and support that we can.
Now, your organization, is it targeting just the Muslim community? Because it says it in the title.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there's other projects, like you said, up and down the country, like the Sharon Project, that doesn't have religion as a base of, you know, in their title. So was that a conscious decision? Is it more problems within the Muslim community, hence why you named your charity in that way?
I think what we need to understand about all of these issues, all of these abuses that exist in our communities, like domestic violence, forced marriage, it isn't religion specific.
Right.
It isn't, it isn't culture specific.
Yeah.
We know that, right? It happens in all our communities, in all our religious groupings. It happens. But actually, the reason we set up with the name the Muslim Women's Network was because there was a specific need that we felt we needed to address that some other projects may not have been reaching out to.
Right.
Now, our network has over 600 members across the UK, and it's increasing. That tells us that there's a need.
Yes.
That doesn't mean we're better or worse
I'm
than
just
any
saying
other
that
organisation.
why was that? Because you made it quite clear.
I mean,
because it just feels like, you know, sometimes when you're part of a community, you want to speak to someone part of you.
Exactly.
That's what, but then
And I
if
think
someone who wasn't part of the Muslim community that wanted to reach out to you guys, are they still welcome to speak to you?
Of course. And I think we also have men contacting us. And I think that's really important, that these issues don't only affect women, they also affect men. And men also need to be as brave as women, coming forward and reporting these issues.
Thank you so much for coming on the show to talk to us about it. If anyone's been watching and is thinking, actually, I'd like to give you a call or I'd like to visit the website, what are the details?
Our website is www.mwnhelpline.co.uk. All our contact details are on the website, so please give us a call. And remember, just don't suffer in silence. Contact somebody and be brave.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I think that's the key point that you've raised today. It's not shame on the victim, it's shame on the perpetrator for doing this. Thank you so much. If you'd like to email us and perhaps you'd like to get more details about what we've been talking about today, then the email address is info@bridasia.tv.
And if there's any subject that you want us to cover, anything, get in touch with us on BritAsia, and we will do our best and utmost best to talk about that subject with some professionals and some very talented guests who will be able to join us here on the sofa. But now we're going to go into a break.